as loud as this one. How about now, Josh? Talking normally. Hello? Check, check. I'll notch it down over here. Here we go. Hold on. Check, 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 check. Any better, Josh? Check, 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 check. Not overdriven. Oh, on a delay, sorry. You could probably turn it up a little bit. Yeah, I think you were getting gain from there, so. Check, check. That's all the way up.
And I'm Sartaj. I'll be your other co-host.
So first of all, just a reminder, it looks like everybody has their mask on, so thank you for doing so. Just a reminder to keep your mask on when you're not actively eating or drinking out in the kitchen area. If you do need a mask, we have masks somewhere that you can get. We have them at the entrance, or you can come find me, Sartaj, Sean, who's probably floating around somewhere out there, can get a mask for you if you need it.
Some things you want to know about the building that we're in. We're in Tech Nexus. There's bathrooms right outside over there. Food and desserts. I see most of y'all have already gotten some. There's some drinks in the refrigerator, the clear refrigerator over there. During the breakout groups, there are offices down there, and there's 3 of them, and they have HDMI and USB 3 connectors. Please do not take them, but use them. And yeah, keep wearing your mask. The agenda for today, the event already started. We are currently at the welcome point. We'll be doing some house rules that we've been talking through, some introductions. We'll get into the presentation. After the presentation, we'll do some Q&A, and then we will get into our breakout groups. And then around 9, we will head out. Oh, and we make sure to adhere to our code of conduct. For those that are interested, you can check out the QR code and read it out. For those that just want the TLDR, just be courteous and nice and make space for others. Sartaj, he, him, Invisalign kinda sucks.
Hey all, Derek Eater, he, him, bought the Oreos.
Linda Zavers, she, her, I'm here now.
Steve Edgar, they, them. Beyond busy.
Katie Rossman, she, her. Data, happy Hanukkah.
Hey, I'm Fiona, pronoun she, her. Tech for good.
Hey, I'm Lori, she, her, Auld Lang Syne.
Hi, I'm Melissa, she, her. I love cookies.
Samantha, she, her, and I don't know, sick of winter already.
Hi, I'm Kevin, he, him, good software developer.
Alvin, they, them, theirs, in person, number 2.
Hi, everyone. My name's Flora, she, her, and 3 words, curious urban planner.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos, he, him, and first time here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim, she, her, and food was good.
Hi, Thomas McClendon, and he, him. Pigeons are peculiar.
Lexus, he, him, caramel cookies tasty.
Emmanuel, he, him, excited to be here.
Hello, Cameron, so, he, him, learning about learning.
Hello, Vian, he, him, and thanks all bakers.
Hi, this is Guru. This is my first time as well. So I'll do 2 words, product person.
Hi, Dylan, he, him, last meeting 2023.
Mohit, he, him, here to learn.
Sneha, she, her, yay Ghostbusters.
Stella, she, her, cookies are good.
Sean, he, him, bought first domain name. Sorry, that was 4 words.
Hi, I'm Claire, she, her. My cat hates Christmas.
Kyle, he, him. Thanks for dessert.
Hello, I'm Felipe, he, him, el, and glad to be here.
Sean, he, him, ready for eggnog.
Josh Kalov, he, him. Cookies are great. We have a couple from the chat. Dan Basil, he, him, Tutor Mentor Institute. Joel Inwood, he, him, at home cookie list.
Brian Ashby, he, him, video here always.
Amethyst Davis, she, they, Shy Hack Night.
Perfect. All right, well, welcome everybody. I heard a couple people who are here for the first time. Can you raise your hand if this is your first Shy Hack Night? Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So the next exciting thing we're going to do is
chat with your neighbor, specifically a neighbor you did not come with. So look around, find someone you did not meet or who you don't know, and talk to them about anything. Talk to them about civic tech, talk to them about why you're here, talk to them about pea coats versus parkas and why pea coats are better. There'll be a 5-minute timer, so go. You know what's funny is I actually
Okay. You have now gotten to know your neighbor. Congratulations. Maybe more than one neighbor, which is even better. And I did want to test, because I have a new microphone now. Does this microphone work okay? Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, so we just have a few more announcements to go through before the presentation here. So first of all, if you didn't notice, we have a dessert contest going on. So hopefully when you came in here, you got a couple beads that you can use to vote. Everybody who brought a homemade good, there should be a little cup next to the homemade good that you can put one of your beads, two of your beads, maybe you stole some more beads and you can put all of them in one cup, however you want to vote. We'll do it the Chicago way. So, exactly. Maybe even more. Yeah, and so we'll have voting probably until about 8:30. We'll see how the night kind of goes, and then we'll announce the winner, let people know who the winner is. And there is some sort of mystery prize that the winner will get, which is, what, a mug? A mug? But there's more, because I actually brought some truffles and some candy canes that you can get too.
Not so mystery prize.
I know. We revealed the mystery too soon. Sorry.
We have a Slack. Slack is the best way to get in touch with the community here. If you haven't joined the Slack, feel free to hit that QR code and check it out. There's multiple channels you can see there. You can go to intros and introduce yourself. It's a very active community across multiple channels there. Most breakout groups use multiple channels there. We also do have social media. Social media is not as active, but they exist. We're more active on LinkedIn, but we also have Instagram and X. And some members are also on Mastodon and many of the decentralized things out there if you're interested. So look for the hashtags.
All right, so how can you get more involved with TriHack Night? Well, the main thing is just attending the event. So you're all contributing to TriHack Night, so thank you for attending. If you'd like to do more, in a little bit after the presentation, we'll have breakout groups. You can get involved with the breakout group. You can also propose a speaker, or you can be a speaker at TriHack Night if you like. We're also always looking for volunteers who can help run the event, doing what Sartaj and myself are doing up here, co-hosting. We have a lot of other things you can volunteer for. And then at the very end, you can also become a member of TriHack Night to vote on bylaws, vote for the board of directors, and just kind of help steer the direction of TriHack Night. And on that last note, I do want to let people know, particularly members, so if you are a member of TriHack Night, can you raise your hand? Yay, members. All right, so a reminder to all the members that it is that time of the year again, and I'm not talking about the holidays. I am talking about membership renewal. Yay! So remember, by January 15th of next year, you need to renew your membership if you like to stay a member of TriHack Night. And a little early notice that there's going to be a slight change in the qualifications for membership coming up very soon. Basically, we're just kind of reducing the number of total TriHack Night events you need to attend to qualify for being a member. So stay tuned. We'll have it on the website, where you can also access the application for membership, and we'll be sending out emails announcements to members as well with all those details as soon as possible.
And for those that earlier said that they were here for the first time, raise your hand one more time. Please hit that QR code and fill out the demographic survey. It will help us make sure that we are hitting more and more communities of diverse backgrounds and make sure we're doing things the right way with this.
I'll give everybody a second or two to get the QR code. Or you can also just remember bit.ly/CHN-demographics. Perfect. All right. And we are also always looking for money. Not necessarily from you. If you want to give us money, we'll love that. But if you also happen to work for a company or know of a company who would really love to support Civic Tech and support Chai Hack Night, you can reach out to sponsorship at chaihacknight.org, or another lovely QR code that will just automatically pre-populate an email to send to us at sponsorship at chaihacknight.org.
Upcoming events, there are none. Because it's December and it's holiday season. So our next event will be on January 2nd, which will be online and an open hack. So what that means is we'll join at the starting time, and breakout groups will just get into it.
All right. Does anybody have another announcement that they would like to make to the community? No? All right. Well, without further ado, we'll hand it over to our presenter again, Amethyst Davis, for presenting this evening.
Okay, can everybody hear me well? All right, so my name is Amethyst Davis. I'm the founder of the Harvey World Herald, which is a hyperlocal, Black-owned, Gen Z-led newsroom down in Harvey, Illinois, which is in the south suburbs, which is also my hometown. And today I wanted to, actually, thank you to Chicago Hack Night, Chai Hack Night, for inviting me to come out and speak with you all. And today I wanted to talk about, this sort of effort we see nationwide to quote unquote save local news. And I want to talk about the work that we're doing in Harvey, which really is about not trying to save local news and why we shouldn't. So I'm going to sort of go over, what it's been like to build the Harvey World Herald. I want to talk about Ida B. Wells, who's often considered the godmother of modern day investigative reporting, and movement journalism specifically, which is a new framework to address some of the contending issues that we see in journalism, a lot of it dealing with like racism and not holding power to account, not doing the type of truth-telling work we really need to be doing in these newsrooms. And then I want to actually sort of embark on a conversation about what many are dubbing the new Black press, and what many younger newsrooms that are being led by younger Black folks are doing around not saving local news, and where the Harvey World Herald is in with that. So how many of you have ever heard of Harvey, by a show of hands? I know you lying. I was expecting nobody to raise their hand. Harvey's my hometown. It's down in the south suburbs, for those who don't know. Harvey, I always tell people, all these communities in suburban Cook County, Harvey is literally the only place where people will flat out tell you when they leave here and someone asks where you're from, we will tell you, I'm from Harvey. We won't say, oh, I'm from Chicago, and then people say, well, what part? You're like, it's kind of near the city, but not in the city. No, we will tell you I'm from Harvey. So it's a deep sense of community pride. These pictures I have here, Harvey really is like a small town, right? Big small town, 20,000 people. It's largely Black and brown. At this point, it's a lower income community. But we the baddest to ever do it. It's flat out. So on the left here, you have Harvey's only high school, which is Thornton Township High School, AKA Wildcat Country. I have my TTHS mask on, best high school in Illinois State. I don't make the rules, facts don't lie, people do, debate your mama. And then to the right, you have this really beautiful mural here that my dear friend Amaz Wright did, called Harvey World Wall. I present these two images to you because if you ever hear about Harvey, these are not the sort of beautiful, gleaming images you're presented with. So in the broader sort of frame, mentality or consciousness of this area, Harvey's really become shorthand for two things: crime and political corruption. So Harvey back in the mid 20th century was known as the gateway to the south suburbs because it was the economic beacon of the south suburbs. So you'll oftentimes hear people in the city say that, there was this effort, not to extend the red line past 95th because they didn't want people from, black folks from the city moving to the suburbs. They specifically did not want them moving to the south suburbs. So the thinking was if you were in Chicago, or in this area and you wanted to, move up, in the ladder, you wanted to move to Harvey, right? It was the site of where you could access jobs, beautiful homes. So everybody wanted to go to Harvey. And if you said you lived in Harvey, people would ask you, man, what do you do for a living? Mid 20th century, Harvey sort of falls victim to what is unfortunately all too common a story in many sort of post-industrial communities, and that deindustrialization comes into the picture, and sort of all of these major jobs leave out, manufacturing plants close up, and then you have waves of white flight, right, and agitated by racial and economic segregation in Harvey and in the south suburbs. And so over the decades, in the latter portion of the 20th century, Harvey really takes a steep economic decline. And then all the while, in the background, you have political leaders who are just flippantly corrupt. So across multiple, mayoral administrations, you had mayors that were giving people cars because they were their friends, or they were, giving folks city-owned homes to just have simply because, they were cool. People who were on payroll, but who didn't actually work for the city, stuff like that. And so in the 21st century, Mayor Eric J. Kellogg, elected in 2003, he really takes corruption in Harvey to, new heights. Literally just today, his brother, Derek Muhammad, who was a lieutenant in the traffic division at Harvey Police Department, was convicted of extorting local tow companies in exchange for city contracts, because in Harvey, towing contracts are through the city. And so, Kellogg, his name is never, he's never been convicted for anything, but it's pretty well understood that he had his hands all in the mix of a lot of these things in Harvey. So when people say Harvey, Illinois, there is pretty much a superficial narrative that comes to many's minds. So I saw so many hands go up. I assume no hands would go up, but I'm so curious as to, for the folks who have heard of Harvey, what are some of the things that you've heard about Harvey for someone who raised their hand very quickly? Very quickly. Jabuki definitely, no, listen. Jabuki is from Harvey, and he used to twerk in front of the Walgreens on 147th and Halsted for honey buns, and his brother Javon used to throw hand warmers at him. Jabuki's definitely from Harvey. But one of the things that the community, has really become frustrated with over the years is, there's so much deep pride in Harvey. My granny and granddaddy, they were the first Black family to integrate the block I grew up on of 152nd and Loomis. And my Aunt Mary, my granny's sister, she lives around the corner. And so our family units are really close. And Harvey, you see Thornton here, there are purple and white sidewalks. There are churches painted purple and white. There are businesses painted purple and white. It is a school pride community in every sense. And so it's really frustrating when you kind of see your community painted in a superficial way that doesn't, at the very least, do the work of trying to look at some of the larger institutional problems that cause, corruption and things like segregation to exist and persist in your community. So that's a little about Harvey. Our newsroom's origin story is, I hate to use the language of a hero story, but it because there are no heroes or saviors in any of this, and I'll get to that later. But our newsroom is a pandemic era newsroom. So 2020, I was actually in New York City working at a university on the East Coast. COVID hits, and so I decided to come back to Illinois and just check on my people. And so I'm getting off downtown Harvey on the train, the metro station on 154th Street, and I'm presented with, I mean, everything just looked the same. So there are people strung out in the middle of the street, abandoned properties that were, you know, there when I was in high school. They looked in better shape. And this was just like a dramatically, I think for me, different picture of the pandemic's impact than what I had at first, you know, become accustomed to. Because in New York City, when you went to Times Square, there was literally nobody else around, right? Like the pandemic had sort of upended life as we know it and brought in all this despair. But for Harvey, that was business as usual. So when I hopped off the train and saw that, I was particularly disturbed because it looked the same as when I had left 6 years prior. Okay, so I come to 152nd and Loomis. So I actually grew up, you can see my granny's Jeep right there. That's my granny's Jeep. And so there's this, that's Mr. Leroy's house, this brown house here, and this white one second to the last. That's the home I grew up on. I grew up in on 152nd and Loomis. And I always say that 152nd and Loomis is like one of the most quintessential blocks in the immediate downtown Harvey area. And it's really because of the community, right? You know, my granny and granddaddy were on that block, are on that block. Miss Cooksey was across the street. You know, Miss Tate house was up the block. She was the candy lady. So everybody in the neighborhood eventually found their way to my block growing up. But it hurt as I was rounding the corner, because what you don't see here, there are two homes on my block. It used to be Sam and Trey's old house, and I forget the woman the old lady next to them, but the homes are literally caving in on themselves. And usually, you know, this is a point where I would put those sorts of images up, but I don't want to leave you with those images, so I didn't put them here. But, you know, they didn't look like that when I left for high school. And so that sort of like was really jaw-dropping for me and disturbing. And so I decided to try to figure out what had been happening in Harvey since I had been gone those 6 years. You know, I wanted to know where I could find a COVID-19 test. That didn't really pan out. There wasn't really much information about where to find a COVID-19 test. You know, how to get the COVID-19 shot when that became available. Did the city have an outdoor dining program? These things I was trying to get answers to, and I really couldn't. And so in the process of me trying to sort of catch up with what was happening in Harvey, it sort of clicked that for someone like myself, who, you know, worked in an environment in which I was tasked with getting information, getting it quickly, being able to sort of like disseminate that to students, faculty, whomever came to me for whatever issue they had that day, because I always tell people it was my job, do everybody else's job. You know, that if it was hard for me, especially as someone who also has a bit of a policy research background, to find out what was happening in Harvey, the situation had to be much more pronounced for someone who was formerly incarcerated, coming home, trying to just figure out how to get their state ID or reacclimate to the community. The situation had to be much more pronounced for a single mother trying to raise 3 kids by herself and figure out how to navigate that all alone. And so I decided to, as a then 24-year-old who thought she knew everything, I decided to quit my job in New York City and move back to Illinois and build that very thing to help us all. So I decided to build a newsroom in Harvey from the ground up. Now, mind you, Harvey did not have a newsroom for about 30, 40 years. So I grew up in a news desert. The papers, the Harvey Star Tribune, the Harvey News Bee, they had gone under several decades ago. And so I'm also, again, 24. I think I know everything. I'm also tasking myself with trying to really take on this sort of like the news desert crisis that we often hear about in this country. But I did not want to replicate the wheel. Like, I know that people, in Harvey, we hate looking up on the TV screens, and seeing Harvey yet again on Chicago's TV news. For just yesterday, we had like an entire lot of semi-trucks catch fire. So that's a thing. It's stuff like that, but you want to look up and you want to see positive images about your community as well. You want conversations about policy, right? You want conversations about the sort of institutions and the political institutions in your community and how they're structured. You want dialogue. You want solutions-oriented, conversations. You want to bring people together to actually take action in your community. This is like, these are things about Harvey, like natives through and through. We are not, I'm just about to sit here and mope a type of people. We are very, okay, here's a problem. I'm going to be direct about it. I'm about to get up and do something about it type of people, right? So how could we build a newsroom in the community, but also build it in a way that actually works for the public? Being very realistic about the deep-seated racism and sexism and classism, insert literally every other ism here, about journalism and about how that has shown up in our own community. And so the Harvey World Herald, last January, I launched this newsroom as a one-person operation. I don't actually have a J school background. So I do not come from a traditional sort of journalism training. And I think in many ways that's actually the benefit. I used to see it as a disadvantage, but I think not coming in with any type of preconceived ideas about what journalism is or really what it should be has been to my benefit, and really been to the community's benefit, and trying to see the community as a partner as opposed to an other, and building this newsroom, which is why our tagline is building the news together. And so in the now 2 years that we've been up, or coming up, I've been doing a lot of reflecting about this work in the time since. So in April, we were the first newsroom in generations to cover the municipal races. In that, till this day, we still get, compliments about our coverage, right? We were able to do deep campaign finance research into the mayoral race. We were able to put together an election center so people had access to polling locations and voter registration information. And we also looked at some of the key issues that were driving the race, like business and economic development, like crime, and there was a whole politics to the rhetoric that candidates were using around that. But one of the things that I really haven't, I don't think, had the time to really sit with, and just so you all know, I'm the only full-time staff member at the Harvey World Herald. So last year was a one-person operation. Now it's myself and over a dozen freelancers, right? So I really haven't had, I think, the time to really sit down until now, the end of the year, right, to think about the Harvey World Herald and the sort of larger history of the Black press in this country and where we are within this conversation about the Black American struggle toward actualizing democracy. And so as I've been trying to, sit with a lot of that as of late, I've been thinking about how, for Black people in this country, we've always been several standard deviations away from democracy, right? So the Daily Record was a Black-owned newspaper down in Wilmington, North Carolina. And in a massacre, race riot in the late 1800s, a white mob burned down the newsroom. And this is the image you see here presented in front of you. This is a white mob taking a picture of themselves in front of the destruction of one of one of America's first Black-owned newspapers, right? And so I look at this, and I think about, what it's like to, at this particular time, not even be able to access the right to vote, right? But to know that a free press is supposed to be the cornerstone of a democracy, and you literally see it get burned down right in front of your eyes, right? If Black people, if we could not have the right to vote, in many communities, we had local newspapers, right? And I'm thinking about folks like Ida B. Wells, a civil rights icon who was actually here in Chicago on the South Side for some time. Her reporting, she's considered the godmother of modern day investigative journalism. And so much of her work was actually about things like this to the left. It was about white mobs senselessly attacking Black communities, and to be more specific, it was about the lynchings taking place in the South, right? And I think about how bold and audacious Ida B. Wells had to have been at a time like this, doing this work, knowing this could have gotten you killed, right? This sort of truth-telling that you were not supposed to be doing, right? And I think about what role the Harvey World Herald, what role other, Black-owned and managed and Black-centered newsrooms today have to be doing to sort of live up to the legacies of folks like Ida B. Wells and to carry that torch. And I think about things like movement journalism, which is this emerging framework that we see in journalism, or that really is nothing like how we've ever really operated. I think journalism traditionally, especially sort of capital J journalism, is very profit driven. We say that we hold power to account, when in reality we kind of sidestep power, right? We seek buy-in from the very institutions that we're supposed to check, right? So a good example of this, in Harvey, I actually had someone, a reporter in Chicago, I was telling them about some of the accountability work we're trying to do regarding Harvey Police Department. And then they asked me, have you interviewed the chief yet? And I said, no. And they were like, why not? And I'm like, well, because they're cops. They don't want to speak to the reporters. And then I also had mentioned, I said, and we also are investigating them. For trying to vet some allegations of police brutality and misconduct in Harvey. So that's probably another reason why they don't want to speak with us. And, their response to me was, well, here's what you do. Sometimes, when you try to reach out to someone, you won't tell them what it is you're really trying to get at, but you sort of be nice with them, sort of play it safe, so you get that interview with them now. And you sort of sidestep the very things, the real issues you want to talk about, so you can actually get the buy-in with them. And so, for me, what that came off as was, so I'm supposed to really sit here as a reporter, knowing that this is someone who has these allegations against them, and buddy up to them and cozy up to them, instead of doing my job. For what? For what? What's the point, right? Imagine if reporters, for that type of grace, if you want to call it that, imagine if reporters were actually taught that the same level, like the fervor with which we try to build relationships with the very people we're supposed to hold to account, imagine if we actually applied that same energy to the very communities that want us to serve them and want us to work with them, right? So imagine if a reporter, instead of doing what this person had advised me to do, applied that same energy to trying to build relationships with people who've been directly impacted by violence, including police violence, in these communities. I'm pretty sure people would prefer that as opposed to shucking and jabbing for cops, right? And so movement journalism looks at things like that, right? And says that we should be rejecting this sort of style of journalism that says that we should be trying to appease power, right? Movement journalism really rejects objectivity, the idea that reporters are sort of at a distance from the community and treating the community as an other. And really what movement journalism posits is that, you know, we have not really done the level of truth-telling that we need because we're too busy trying to play both sidesism, right? Like, you know, you don't both sidesism white supremacy. You don't both sidesism racism, right? Like, you know, I think you don't both sidesism like lies. Like if a politician lies, you should say that they lied. These are things that we are not eager to do. And I think it's partly because we are trying to maintain the sort of idea that we don't sit in these newsrooms and actually take the time to really make decisions about the narratives that we make and the type of coverage that we push, because we know that we do. Movement journalism is also very collaborative, and it is rooted in people power. So I think about a really great example of this. City Bureau here in Chicago, the Documenters program, right? I actually did some time with documenters. That is collaborative people power, right? They are equipping everyday folks to actually go out into the community, the Documenters program, take notes and contribute that to a public database and try to build a multiracial democracy, right? There's no savior complex. There are no individual heroes, right? Traditional journalism teaches us that there's a star reporter in the newsroom, they're the go-to for certain issues, and movement journalism is really grounded in this sort of egalitarian, you know, horizontal leadership, right? That we are not trying to be one person who's standing out in front, pulling everyone else behind us, but rather we are kind of, you know, we're side by side trying to pull one another, right? So it's very rooted in collaboration, and it's also grounded in trying to reduce harm. And I feel like, you know, in a place like Harvey, right, where we easily could be replicating the wheel, you know, the Harvey World Herald has never been responsible, or we know prior to our existence, you know, we were not the cause of why so many Black and brown people in Harvey distrust the media or distrust journalists. That predates us. But if we want to actually build this operation with the community, we do need to acknowledge that there's harm done and actually position ourselves to work toward repairing it, right, and moving forward. So even though we may or may not have, you know, been responsible for a lot of these things, we still take responsibility in actually doing like the reparations work, okay? And lastly, a really key point about movement journalism is that it asks how, why, and I think most importantly, and, right? How is something occurring in a community, right? So if I look at D-Ray just shot Deshaun, right? That's gun violence, okay? Why is it occurring, right? Movement journalism says that we need to actually take a look at structural issues and systemic forces as opposed to laying blame on individual actors. I think that is one of like the best parts about movement journalism, is that it demands you actually think on a structural level. But above all else, it also demands right, more, which is to say, I think, solutions, right? One of the key components of movement journalism is that it's not just grounded in, oh my gosh, gloom and doom, but actually tries to think about what are policies, what are systems that could actually work to prevent these issues from occurring again. And I think that is the most, I think for me, personally, the most touching part, right? Because I'm just not even, I think, again, being from Harvey, I'm not somebody who just wants problems presented to me all day. Remember, Harvey, we're go-getters. So let's talk about all the problems in the community, but please, let's talk about what we are going to do to fix it. That is my energy, and that is how my community moves. And if you want to read more about movement journalism, there's this really great book called The View from Somewhere by Lewis Raven Wallace, and it is really considered like one of the most seminal texts in trying to understand movement journalism, which is still actually fairly new in this space. It's only been something that's in our lexicon for about 5 or 6 years or so 2016, 2017. And it actually emerged in the South. Journalists in the South were concerned with building new frameworks to tackle challenges in journalism today. I look at the Harvey World Herald, and I actually think that for myself, as someone who, I didn't go to J school, I did documenters. As someone who decided to be bold and audacious and try to build a newsroom from the ground up, and they have like no business background on top of everything else, I've needed some type of a framework. I've needed a sort of North Star. I've needed something to guide me to do this work. But I've also needed community. And so I've actually found that as a founder with other newsrooms across America that are themselves in some way grounded in movement journalism explicitly, or still apply movement journalistic principles to their work. And so I think what differentiates the Harvey World Herald and Baltimore Beat, the Tribe here in Chicago, which I really admire, our newsrooms from our predecessors. We are inspired by the militarism of folks like Ida B. Wells. That is definitely, in the wheelhouse. I don't want people to get the impression that a younger generation of journalists is dismissing those who've come before them, which I think is oftentimes the sort of impression we give about young people doing any type of a work. I think the newer generation of Black-owned newsrooms is very, we hold in high regard our predecessors and our ancestors. But we are challenged by different forces that our legacy newsrooms really had not been before. I think specifically by things like technology, right? The technological advancements, social media. I think you having to adjust to social media, and you living in or serving a community like Harvey with deep digital divides, pervasive misinformation and disinformation, news literacy issues. I think that our generation of reporters were being challenged by things that legacy publications had not been before. But I also think that we differ from them, and that while we recognize, as they do, that the house is on fire, right? I don't think we're as eager to go try to save the house. Like, I think many of us see the house on fire and we just like, all right, let it burn. Let it burn. And then we'll go build a new house. I think the new Black press is focused on building new houses, right? And using things like movement journalism as a possible framework, one of many frameworks for trying to figure out how we take this institution and sort of reimagine it for our communities and reimagine its impact and what it can do to sort of bring us together and tether us against these larger forces that attempt to tear us apart. But there are challenges. The challenges are garbage. I could riff. There's plenty of things that we are all reckoning with. I think one of the biggest things is the change in the finance models. Like in Chicago, there's been in the area a very explicit shift toward nonprofit journalism, and that has a lot of benefits. But then we also deal with sort of like the nonprofit industrial complex, and our newsroom, is largely grant funded, right? Which we kind of need, because when a third of the community lives at or below the poverty line, it makes something like being 70% reader revenue like WBEZ kind of just out of the picture. When you serve a real small town of 20,000 people where everybody knows everybody, and advertising dollars historically have always had this sort of pressure on newsrooms to not tell certain stories. It becomes increasingly hard to, really, leverage advertising dollars in a small town. And so you have to think about that in a much more regional scale. There are definitely financial challenges, but I think what a lot of Black newsrooms, a younger generation of Black reporters are really talking about is the blog sites and the misinformation and disinformation heads, the talking heads on the internet. How many of you have ever heard of the Shade Room? By a show of hands. It's the TMZ of Instagram. No? No? Okay, a couple of y'all, yeah. So the Shade Room and Say Cheese, Vlad TV. I'm gonna get on him last. But these are, sort of social media like sites where there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation spread. The target audience, you can just tell, is Black people though. I don't even think that I know Shade Room is led by Black folks. I don't think Say Cheese is led by Black people. And I know Vlad TV ain't led by Black people. But they are geared toward folks, right, who are rightfully disaffected with mainstream media. 1. 2, they do want to know what's happening in the world around them. And 3, these clowns have just found an audience, right? And so there are many people who I think when they look at, their family members or their cousins or whomever on the internet sort of reposting things that are grossly misleading, I think it's real easy to shame them. But I think, younger generations of reporters, I think we actually look at this. We look at those folks and who are posting these things, reposting these things, and I don't think we are looking to shame them. I don't feel as though the conversations I sit in on and participate in are rooted in shame culture, but I think that they are really rooted in trying to humanize these people and recognize that they are victims, right? These are people, again, who they don't trust the mainstream media. There's a lot of damage and harm there. And they do want to know what's happening in their community and the world around them. And these people, Vlad TV, Say Cheese, they just found the audience when so many other newsrooms would not go reach these communities. The folks who are spreading misinformation and disinformation did, right? But it's still a big challenge nonetheless, right? Because you have to not yuck somebody's yum while still yucking their yum. So it's hard. It's hard. But I think that in many ways we are living up to the task. I think movement journalism, like I said, I don't think it's the framework for trying to do things like build newsrooms that actually work for the public good, or really be concerned with building new institutions that work for the public good. I don't think it's the only way of trying to solve America's news desert crisis and building, effectively sort of trying to use a clean slate to build newsrooms that people actually can trust, that make people run toward the things happening in their community as opposed to running away from them. But I think that the new Black press has really embraced movement journalism as a way of building these new homes. I look at the Tribe here in Chicago. Shout out to, maybe they're gonna see it, maybe not. Shout out to Tiffany Walden and Morgan Johnson over there. They actually produced the Revolutionary column, which is, I think, one of the grassroots organizers here actually had been writing about things like, pitfalls of criminal justice, in the Lori Lightfoot campaign, and sort of rethinking the tenure of Kim Foxx, right? And sort of taking, a really hard punch up at a lot of the mainstream crime and violence coverage you see here in Chicago. I think about the Kansas City Defender. I really admire them so much. Ryan Sorrell launched Kansas City Defender, and it is like the Harvey World Herald, Gen Z led. But I think what the Kansas City Defender has done a great job of is making the argument that young Black people can be reached. You just really have to make the news sort of, you really have to present the news and information in the way that they actually dig. And they've actually built out much of their following through social media, right? Which people often regard as the only side of misinformation and disinformation, which I think is contestable. But they've made the case that that newsrooms can be using things like social media to reach Gen Zers, to reach Black people. I think about, they had a story, they actually broke the story that there was someone in Kansas City kidnapping Black women and locking them up in homes in the basement. And like Kansas City PD was like, that's not true. We haven't received anything. And so like there were a lot of mainstream newsrooms that blasted them for reporting this out. And then like 2 weeks later, a woman, she escaped from a basement and was like, some dude had me chained up. And they were right. This newsroom did not do what Ryan calls, which is, he says newsrooms usually act as stenographers for the police. We usually just regurgitate everything, copy pasta. I call it copy pasta, copy pasta. We usually just regurgitate whatever they tell us to. Because in J school, you're not taught to fact check the police. And so I really admire the Kansas City Defender because they actually stood 10 toes down at not, blatantly, just at first glance regurgitating a police narrative, and they were all actually able to hold them to account about the fact that they missed this, and then told them it didn't even exist. I look at MLK 50 Memphis, which is a Black woman-owned, specifically operation down south. They are focused on really, I think, workers' justice and looking at issues of power and policy. I admire them greatly. I was recently in conversation with Wendy Thomas, who is the founder of MLK 50, and she's someone who, I think about making the case to funders, right, to philanthropists who now want to pump more money into journalism because they see it as a public good. She is one of those folks who is really, I think, behind the scenes trying to push, funders in a way that makes it easier for younger generations like ours to emerge. I consider MLK 50 Memphis a part of the new Black press. Wendy is a little bit older than me, older than the rest of us, but she is paving the way for newsrooms that are maybe 2 or 3 years, behind it. And then Scalawag is in the South. The South is the rooter to the tutor. Scalawag is actually, talking about things like police and prison abolition, and talking about some of the failures of capitalism. Movement journalism doesn't mean that we are sound boxes for activists or for grassroots organizers, but I think that movement journalism means that, reporters of the new Black press are much more open to taking seriously a lot of the rhetoric and, policy prescriptions that people in these grassroots organizing spaces are proposing. So what does this all look like for us, right, for the Harvey World Herald? One of the things that I always say about our newsroom is that we are trying to build something that is built by, for, and with the community, right? Having people who are from the community, from Harvey, Illinois, like myself, actually be able to take back our community's narrative, not being necessarily paternalistic, and thinking that because we're building this type of an apparatus, that makes us the arbiters of, what is and is not legitimate in the community. I think that we embrace this idea that there are multiple ways of looking at something. There are multiple information systems in Harvey, right? So even though Harvey did not have a newsroom, Harvey still had churches. Harvey got a church on like every other block, right? Harvey still got churches. Harvey's, the community's always had like parent-teachers associations. They've had student groups, right? These are also, I think, for the, legacy Black newsrooms, these are the types of spaces we had outright embraced against this larger backdrop of an institution and an industry that sort of told us that these spaces were not legitimate, that these voices were not legitimate. And so we have done this work of trying to make sure we recognize and affirm those spaces in the conversations we have with residents and how we approach our reporting. I do not like to use this language of we've discovered X or, we've unpacked Y, because if somebody else came to you with a tip about a story that sent you off on your way, baby, you wasn't the first one to get it done, you feel me? But I also think that we are trying to become a conduit, right? I did a survey about 2 years ago, right before I got back to Illinois. And I had asked people all sorts of stuff. Where do you get information? What's your own little background being from Harvey? One of the things I asked people was, who would you like to meet? And so, there were so many different responses. You have folks, I had a teacher, she's worked in Harvey schools for like 20 years. And she was like, I want to meet other parents who was just as dedicated to actually doing right by these kids as I am. And then I had someone who I think they're just a resident who's like, you know what? I hate our bandos. In Harvey, we call abandoned properties bandos. I'm not sure what they call them in the city, but they were like, I hate the bandos. I want to work with other people who want to rehabilitate abandoned properties in Harvey. And someone else was like, you know what? I really am big on the environment and sustainability, and I just want Harvey to be more walkable. And I want more people in Harvey who also care about the environment to, I want to be talking with them about these different things and figure out how we can make Harvey more green, right? People in Harvey want to build relationships. They want to get to know their neighbors. When you live in a community, when you've been told, right, that all y'all are dirt, all y'all are trash, it makes it innately harder to do something like mutual aid. You can't do mutual aid if you don't trust your next door neighbor, right? If a global pandemic hits, you don't want to go door to door and actually, use that as an opportunity to draw closer as opposed to detether yourselves, right? If you've been told that these were people off rip needed to fear. So the question for me, in the sort of role that I have, is I ask myself, how can the Harvey World Herald act as a conduit? How can we take all these different pre-existing information systems in the community and try to bring them together to create some type of cohesion and build a civic infrastructure, right? And so the language I always use is that the Harvey World Herald is really a tiny part of a very big collective vision. Again, there are no heroes in this. There are no savior complexes in this. And the Harvey World Herald doesn't want to become an entity in the community that positions itself as such, right? And in that, we're concerned with an ecosystem and trying to create abundance, right? If you think about communities that thrive, it's not just about meeting their basic needs. They live in abundance, right? And so how do we create this type of free-flowing information? How do we bring people together against the very forces that attempt to rip them apart? And so we actually now are part of a forthcoming local news collaborative in the South suburbs called the Local News Alliance that is actually going to be working around lots of these things. There are other small publishers in the South suburbs that have been up for longer than the Harvey World Herald, and they've just struggled to grow. But they care just as much as I do about our respective communities. So this is like Harvey and Homewood and Flossmoor. I think Park Forest is in the mix. We got Olympia Fields in the mix. And we're trying to figure out How is it that we just do our jobs? How do we literally just, how do we build an entire information ecosystem in a region that is chock full of news deserts? How do we do the work that we've been doing on a much grander scale? How do we collaborate with one another? Is that reporting projects? Is it fundraising? Is it leveraging our respective networks to deepen relationships with funders to get money? Is that a pooled fund? Do we have this thing operate as a fiscal sponsor? How do we do this? The bottom line is we all give a damn, and a lot of newsrooms in this industry and reporters do not. But at the center of it all, at the center of that effort that you will see in the South suburbs is the new Black press. The new Black press serving the capital city of the South suburbs is going to be helping to ground that effort and possibly become a national model for how we tackle the news desert crisis and reimagine journalism in America. Thank you. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. So I tweaked. The response, because there has been that, it's been overwhelmingly positive since we launched in Harvey. Everybody and their mama reads the Harvey World Herald. I'm talking like school teachers. I know high schoolers who read. We got middle schoolers who read. We have pastors who read. The mayor, he'll sit up here and tell you he don't read the Harvey World Herald. The people who work in the mayor's office tell that man read every single story that goes up on harveyworld.org. He refuses to interview with us at this point because they also tell me he is afraid of us. I think that's a compliment. But it's just been overwhelmingly positive, the sort of response that we've gotten. It's definitely not easy trying to build a newsroom and trying to really tell people that, like, hey, we recognize this is a community of broken promises and hidden agendas, and we are actually trying to not sort of, open that wound. But for the most part, people in Harvey, 20-somethings to seniors, they've been very receptive to the work that we've been doing, and it's only up from here. Now, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can stay up here for questions. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and Sartaj will go around with the mic, and I'll give this back to you so you can answer questions.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. I guess one question is, how do you potentially relate to like the Chicago news ecosystem and like we've heard at Chi Hack Night from the Independent Media Alliance in Chicago, and like just curious, like, do you feel like related to the Chicago kind of city news ecosystem, and how do you feel about connecting with that?
In some ways I do, in some ways I don't. So in the ways that I do, I mean, I came out of Chicago documentary, it's program. So I definitely have relationships and ties there. It has been nothing short of amazing, the type of support that some of the local, hyper-local, nonprofit outlets have extended to our newsroom. Speaking of Chicago Independent Media Alliance, speaking of SEMA, when I got back and I was trying to figure out where are support systems right now we could be tapping into and leveraging. SEMA was one of the immediate ones I found, and I think we've definitely been the beneficiaries of those resources, namely the big fundraising campaign they do, and being able to actually learn how to run those types of things and trying to figure out where those revenue streams fit within the larger business model. In some ways, I don't see us kind of fitting into the Chicago system only because we're in the South suburbs, but it's also like this very uncomfortable and awkward dynamic in that a lot of these reporters in these newsrooms, they did damage in our community and they've never acknowledged it. So it's really sometimes uncomfortable to walk into these rooms and spaces with people who just do unremitted violence in your community and have absolutely, You know, one of the things I always say is that like journalists are like politicians and police, and that they get to, you know, we get to sort of like do harm and are never held to account for it. And so it's just really awkward to sort of also, you know, and frustrating to be around people who everybody and their mama knows that the coverage of Harvey and of South suburban communities by Chicago media has been racist, has been classist and elitist. But you ask any one of them about it, all of a sudden nobody knows about it. And that's just really frustrating and annoying. Oh, I think it was a hand back right here.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It was incredibly inspiring and informative. My question is, I love at the beginning how you talked about Harvey and most people's, if they've heard of it, the representations of Harvey, and how part of the mission of the Harvey World is to showcase more positive depictions. I would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about that in terms of your coverage, how you guys have navigated that, if you found like ways to showcase more positive things, like how you balance that with things that are happening in the community that are newsworthy but are not as positive.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, I'm very curious.
Absolutely. So one of the greatest things about Harvey is that it has always had a thriving arts culture and entertainment scene. So, you know, you mentioned Jabuki. Right. So yeah, Kiki Palmer, she was born, she's actually from Robin, she's from Mudville. They will tear your behind up, you say she's from Harvey. She was born in Harvey though. She was born in Harvey. She was raised, you know, in nearby in Mudville and Robbins. You know, but you look at her, you look at just earlier today, but on my way here, you know, I was coming out of the metro station and Shirt by SZA was playing. Rob Geringer, who's a Harvey native, he co-produced that with Darkchild. He's played the Super Bowl multiple times. You know, if you look at Thornton, the city's only high school, back in like the 80s, it was the #1 speech and drama program in the state. And Thornton, Harvey has always had this history of a rich speech and drama scene. The first Black full-time cast member, openly queer woman, on Saturday Night Live, Denitra Vance, she went to Thornton. And so there's always been this rich artistic energy in, you know, speech and drama, but also in music. I always tell people that Harvey is the hip hop capital of suburban Cook County. We truly are. And we've had this history of just a rich jazz band tradition. Back in like the 70s and 80s, the most popular thing you could do in Harvey was be a band kid. That is not normal. It's just not normal, right? Like, it's very unique. And these are things that the community is deeply aware of and proud of. And so anytime we can actually tap into that energy, which we've been doing very explicitly, we've been highlighting local musicians and producers. We cover the school plays, you know, those performances, the spring play, you know, that has been like youth performing arts. That has been really, I think, the point where we've really been able to showcase to the community that we're serious about making sure we have positive images about the things that have always been here in Harvey, this energy that's always been here. That's, I think, a point where we've been able to tap into that energy and sort of really affirm to the community, we are here to make sure we have affirming energy, images as well. But we also are trying to do this work of bringing policy to the community and reporting on things like school infrastructure and reporting on climate change issues in the south suburbs. And so I think even when those things aren't so lighthearted, I think there is if you read our reporting, there's a deep level of care, of detail, and of rigor in the conversation that people in Harvey are not used to, that because they're presented with it along with these positive images, it just clicks. It just clicks.
You got time for one more question?
So you mentioned the black press, so I'm thinking, of course, you know, the Defender and that bygone era of movement radical journalism that really kind of centered the community in a positive light. And those entities, do you eventually see yourself kind of partnering, being able to partner with them, or working with them, or is the community kind of like, yeah, or just kind of where do you sit with that?
Yeah, so the question being like, do we see ourselves partnering with like legacy Black publishers around here? Yeah, so no, this is a really great question. There are things that, these newspapers can do that like we just can't in the digital space. Like we actually, in Harvey, a lot of the residents want us to produce a physical newspaper. We're currently digital only, but there are deep technological divides, and the seniors don't really want to have a digital presence, which I totally respect, right? They just don't want it. But they're also the most active voting bloc in Harvey, and a lot of the politicians know it, and they take advantage of the seniors because they know they're not tapped into what's really happening in the community. And so we are going to have to some point embrace a print publication. And so I'm really looking toward alternative weeklies like The Reader, Southside Weekly, but also looking toward, the Chicago, the Defenders is no longer print. But I think the Crusader, if I'm not mistaken, the Crusader is still print. Right. So I'm looking toward, our predecessors for assistance with that, because I don't even have a print background. Like that's an entirely different ballgame, not just in the production and the operating costs, but definitely in the distribution process. And so I'm actually going to be looking toward legacy Black news publishers, not just here in Chicago, but also across the country, for assistance with trying to produce a print news publication.
Cool. I think those are all of our questions.
Thank you so much. To the breakout portion of the evening. So if you are leading a breakout group, you can go ahead and come out here and line up. And while folks are lining up, I'll let people know what a breakout group is. So we have two kinds of breakout groups here at Chi-Hack Night. We have what are called learning groups, which, as the name suggests, is all about learning something or discussing something related to civic tech. And then we also have working groups that are a little more project-focused, working on something in particular, a website, an app, something like that, largely related to civic tech. And anybody can start a breakout group, so if you would like to join or start a breakout group, you can definitely do so tonight as well. But I will go ahead and hand it over to our first breakout group.
Oh, I'll go first.
All right.
Hello. Tonight I'm doing something a little different. Who here has heard of Advent of Code? Ooh, only like 3 hands. Okay, so Advent of Code is like every day for the month of December. They put out like a simple code problem, and they're usually about like elves or something weird. So we're gonna be working through a few of them today, kind of in a mob programming style. So we'll all help. So if you're interested in that, I will be 25 seahorses. And it's super beginner friendly, so if you don't know anything, feel free to hop on by.
Hello, I'm Ghost Buses, and we are a project about bus reliability in Chicago, and we have ghostbuses.com. But tonight, brought a fun activity. We can decorate cookies. I baked cookies. This is a ghost. And what? I buses too. Yeah, I only have 2 hands, but yeah. So if you want to come decorate a cookie, no technical knowledge required. I did not have any technical knowledge about how to bake them, so they're a little bit all over the place. But that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We'll be out the door across the hallway. We're 5 alligators, but normally, yeah, we maintain the website, and front end is React, back end is Python. We're kind of actually winding down active development on the project, but tonight will be more of a fun activity, and feel free to stop by if you have questions about the normal website as well.
Hey, I'm Steve from Chi Commons. We have a couple of community projects. We are a worker-owned, multi-stakeholder cooperative, and we sustain ourselves by offering services to business and technology services to small businesses, nonprofits, and cooperatives. But we have a couple of community projects. One of them is our block share project, in which we are lighting up neighborhoods with last mile internet access, and in those neighborhoods putting a server with a software stack, so people can share their garden produce, their time, their talents, their tools, their rides with each other, and organize the community. That's block share. And the other project is our cooperative map. We have a map of cooperative and solidarity entities in the Chicago region, which we've been curating for 7 years now. And we're in the process of upgrading that map to allow more crowdsourcing more easily. And we're using a Postgres database with a back end of Python and Django, and a front end of JavaScript and React. So if you have any of those, or any community organizing or UX, UI experience, please come and join us.
Hey, I'm Sartaj. We've been working on this project called Windy Civvy, which is a way to learn more about the bills that impact you. So we're trying to consolidate bills across local, state, and national legislation. We are summarizing them with AI tools, and we're also trying to make it where you can get notifications on bills that you may care about. So our breakout group is 17 Bell.
Hi, I'm Sean from WardWise. We are a breakout group that's looking at infrastructure and infrastructure spending at the local level. So we've been working with a data set of aldermanic menu spending, and our website is publicly available, but we haven't really pushed it, and we're going to be talking through changes to that and maybe logo design. So we are 2 llamas. I'll hang out here for a bit, and then we usually go down the hall on the left.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam, and I run Independent Study. I don't know if it's on the list, but it is. Oh, you got to remedy that. It is a breakout group for people who don't really want to join a breakout group. You know, you want to come check in. So if you're working on a project, whatever it is, and you want an accountability person to come check in and give a description of what you want, next week or next month, when I do the in-person ones, you can check in with me, and I will follow up and ask you some questions. And if you need help, I know a lot of people here. I can maybe put you in touch with a group that can help, or independent people. Like I had a project here, and Lori with the Ghost Buses helped me out and unblocked what I was working on. So without the resources of this group, I would have been at a loss. So I'm passing it forward. It's Independent Study. One person did sign up last time. Angie, if you're here, I want to know how your JavaScript program is going, you know, your classes. So, yeah, that's it. I have a number 6, and I'll just write down your information and check in with you next time. It's really low key.
All right, I think I'm last. Hey folks, I'm Derek. I'll be running the climate change breakout group tonight. We have been meeting for about 2 years now. We have 2 active projects we're working on right now. One is Electrify Chicago, where we are presenting the top polluting buildings in the city of Chicago in a nice, shameful list. You can go to it at electrifychicago.net. So there's some more features that we're going to be adding to that. I think Victor, who's the main person on that project, will be showing up soonish and will help with that. The second project is we're working on some air quality sensor data for trying to understand and see if there are particular sources we can identify for air pollution in the city of Chicago and have it line up with the sensor data. So there's a group of us that are going to be reviewing some documents and some resources that were shared by a researcher who uses those sensors. We are climate change. We are 10 rhinos, and we'll probably be in like the kitchen area over there. Okay? Oh, Katie, you got one?
101.
101.
Hello. If you've never been to Chi-Hack Night, you might have questions. I'm happy to answer any and all of them. We call it Civic Tech 101, and I have 11 lions. So I'll be somewhere around here, and feel free to find me. Happy to answer anything.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, does anybody have a breakout group that they didn't announce yet? Going once, going twice? I guess that is it. All right, remember to vote for the baked goods. We'll probably count those in about 15 minutes here. So get those beads in if you haven't already. And we will do our usual goodbye of everybody together on the count of 3. We'll say go forth and hack.
1, 2, 3. Go forth and hack.